Marhaba, and welcome to the Matrix Green Pill, where real people connect.
Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pill podcast. My name is Silmarie Hutchison, CEO of Matrix Public Relations. Today I'm so excited to be talking to the lovely Natalya Konforti. She's an artist and the founder of Glitches and Stitches, and someone who has had an interesting journey which includes fashion, finding her passion for creativity, and becoming an advocate for the importance of having a creative outlet. Natalya, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be on the podcast.
So Natalya, tell us a little bit about your background story of your origin and how you ended up in Dubai.
So I grew up in Florida, quite a ways away. My mother's French, and she always encouraged me to spend time there. So I moved to France as a teenager, initially to spend a year as a foreign exchange student. And I guess I got the travel bug because I ended up staying there for 10.
Oh, wow.
School was never my thing, but I had a deal with my mother, who was still living in the US, that she would let me stay in France and set me up in an apartment if I promised to study and work really hard to get my baccalaureate. Which I did, but then after high school, I was just like, I'm done with this. Now I'm doing something creative. I'm doing my own thing. I'd always loved making things, so I wanted to find something that combined creativity, but also with some business aspects so that I could actually make a career out of it. So design was kind of a natural choice. And the city that I was living in at the time in northern France, called Lille, has a rich history in textile manufacturing. So there was a great fashion design school in the area for that reason. So I was kind of naturally drawn to that. But then when I graduated in 2007, the job market was terrible, obviously. It was not the best time to be on the market as a young fashion designer with little to no work experience. So I started off doing some internships, and I noticed that there were a lot of things lost in translation with the Chinese suppliers. And I figured that my one big advantage over the other candidates was the fact that I was bilingual, that I could speak French and English fluently. So I figured that that's where I would have the most impact, is going to work in China and kind of being the eyes and ears of Occidental brands over there, and kind of making sure that expectations were met. So that's how I arrived in Beijing in 2010. Again, thought that I was going there for 1 or 2 years. I obviously can't be trusted because I ended up staying there for 8.
You get attached.
Yeah, I think that in Dubai, a lot of people have kind of that same relationship. I've talked to so many people who told me, yeah, came here for 2, have been here for 15. It's just what happens living abroad. You don't really know what to expect before you get there. And then by the time you're 2 years in, you're settled in, you have your friend group and all of that. So you're kind of not quite ready to leave.
Right. Once you establish, it just makes it easier to stay on for a bit longer. So do you speak Chinese?
I did learn to speak Chinese. I'm sure that I've already forgotten quite a bit, but it's kind of a conversational level. I learned to read and write a bit. I have, was it HSK 3, which means that I could read and write, I think it was 300 characters, which sounds like a lot, but on the scale of the language is not.
Right. It's a very complicated language to learn.
Yeah, but very interesting. Once I started learning the language, I could understand a lot of the cultural differences. A lot of things just kind of clicked into place and started making a lot more sense once I got a grasp of how the language was constructed, because it's just so different from English or French.
Yes. Excellent. So that must have been a fantastic experience. So you've lived in, up until that point, 3 different countries, and now then you made the move to Dubai. But
about 2 years ago.
So before we get into your move to Dubai, and before we talk about what you're doing these days, let's talk about fast fashion. So for our listeners who might not know what the term means, could you please unpack that a bit? Explain what fast fashion is and why you decided to quit the fast fashion industry.
So fast fashion is the kind of high street brands, the ones that churn out collections. They probably have something new in store almost every week. Every time you go into the store, there has to be something new. And basically in fast fashion, generally clothes aren't really made to last. I wouldn't say that they're disposable, but not very far from disposable. A lot of people might wear like one of their t-shirts 2 or 3 times. After the third wear, the third wash, maybe it starts to get a bit deformed. And so, they just throw it out.
Right. And so you decided that this was not the industry for you to be in. Why?
So I was getting a bit frustrated with industry in general. Its lack of sustainability, but then also in terms of creativity. So I saw a bit of an evolution between when I started working in the industry and towards the last few years, that it became more and more of a guessing game. Instead of trying to come up with new ideas and make a really beautiful collection, there was always some kind of race. We have to do more products. It has to be quicker. It has to be cheaper. It has to be the same thing that everybody else is going to have in the stores at the same time. Not before, because otherwise our customers won't be ready, but basically all just trying to guess what the others were doing and emulate them. So I felt like creatively, it wasn't as fulfilling as it used to be. And maybe I had also kind of just done my time. You can only design so many sweaters in 10 years.
Right. So it was just time for you to get out of that. So what would you say are some misconceptions about the fashion industry that people have?
So one really common misconception is that price and quality are not always in direct correlation. So people assume that an expensive item is going to be high quality, but actually that depends much more on the brand's internal testing and quality standards, which are not generally public knowledge. So sometimes small brands can't afford quality tests, and sometimes mid-market brand standards are even stricter than a more expensive brands. And then also brands are usually internally structured by product category. So they might have, for example, an amazing leather supplier and all of their leather is gorgeous quality, but have a really terrible t-shirt production. So you can't always count on, because something is of one brand, that everything that they make is going to be good quality. And you also can't count on the fact that because something is expensive, it's necessarily going to be good quality. When buyers build their collections, they will balance profits. So sometimes there's going to be one product where they're saying, okay, this is what's going to get people in the doors. We're not going to make a lot of profit on it, but we're going to sell a lot, and then people will buy something else. And on this other product, their margin will be much higher. And because of that, the prices and what they actually cost the brand to buy aren't really aligned anymore. So the only way to get around that is to be our own judge of the quality of garments. You have to look at how they're made, feel the fabric with your hands, check the composition labels, and not just the hang tags that say contain cashmere. I have seen before a sweater that said contains cashmere. I checked the composition, and I think there was 1 or 2% cashmere, which is basically as if there were nothing at all. So check the composition labels and check where it's made and check the inside finishing. With a combination of all of that, you can more or less get a feel for if the product looks like it's made to last.
Yes, those are some excellent tips I'm sure our listeners will really benefit from. So let's change gears to where you are today. I know that you're an excellent artist. I love your work. What type of art is your favorite?
I have a soft spot for textile and fiber art, but I also love experimental mixed media, anything that uses items that you wouldn't really necessarily consider as art, and art that explores the overlapping of cultures. Having lived in lots of different places and having a very international family, whenever I see kind of cross-culture artwork, that really speaks to me as well.
Very, very good. So I just want to get back to the your transition. So when you left China, and what was it that drew you to come to Dubai? What was the reason for you ending up in Dubai, not back in France or the US?
So my husband and I, for once, were both thinking that we wanted to make a bit of a career change at the same time, which doesn't happen very often. So after having been in China for 8 years, we figured if we ever want to go live anywhere else, we better jump on the bandwagon now, because who knows when this eclipse will come up again.
Right.
So that's why we made the decision to go somewhere else. For Dubai, actually, my husband works for a big company that has offices in lots of different parts of the world. And when they first mentioned Dubai, to be honest, we didn't think that it was for us. But they offered to pay for a scouting trip so that we could come see. And I have a friend, former colleague, who is working here as an artist, actually. And she showed us parts of the city that we, never would have really found on our own, that were vibrant, and just showed us what Dubai could be, which is very different from the image that people have, not having been here. And a lot of people, when we told our friends that we were moving to Dubai, they're like, "You in Dubai? That doesn't sound like you." But obviously those were all people who had never been here. So they don't realize that it's such a wonderful place for meeting people of diverse backgrounds. What I just love about the city is that everybody has as weird of an answer to the question, "Where are you from?" as I do.
Right, exactly. And it is lovely when you get away from all the touristy things and go and see the real Dubai, the real culture of the city. It's fantastic. So let's talk about your creativity. I know that you are incredibly crafty. So tell us, how did you discover your passion and talent for crafts?
So I've always loved making things. I have pictures of myself creating little projects, dolls out of kumquat from a young age. I've always just loved the concept of bringing something that only exists in my imagination into reality. And a lot of times the only way to make that happen is to make it myself.
Yes.
So there's just a great sense of satisfaction in holding something that you made from scratch in your hands. It's incredibly therapeutic.
That's lovely. So that brings us to talking about glitches and stitches. For those who don't know about it, could you please just tell us about how you decided to start it and what your goal is with glitches and stitches?
So at the very beginning, Glitches and Stitches started out as just an IG account to document my embroidery journey. Back in 2015, 2016, a lot of my clients, when I was working in fast fashion, were requesting embroidery patterns. It was a really big trend, and we couldn't get the samples quickly enough from the factory. So I started making some of them myself and just fell in love with the craft. It's super relaxing. It costs very little to make, and I could always just have an embroidery hoop in my purse and take it with me wherever I go. My stitches in the beginning were obviously a bit flawed, but that's something that appeals to me. I like sensing the human imperfection. I think that a handmade embroidery with its little quirks is so much more special than something that's made from a machine. So that's actually where the glitch in Glitches and Stitches comes from, is to celebrate the flaws.
Yes.
And then in 2018, when we moved to Dubai, I decided to take the leap and further develop the concept. The idea being that it's a platform that celebrates all forms of creativity. I joke that my mission is to help design junkies become self-sufficient.
Lovely. Very nice. So I know you are all about doing it yourself. You do DIY, and you hold different workshops that help other people learn how they can also do it themselves, which is fantastic. So can you tell us, how did you decide to start holding these workshops to educate and help other people?
So at the beginning, when I was telling people about my products, I did a few markets back early 2019. I find myself always wanting to explain the virtues of creativity and the importance of artisanal craftsmanship. And I realized that people would have a much greater appreciation and understanding for the whole making process if they were to do it themselves. So nowadays, I think that we're all actually really thirsty for this kind of activity. something that's offbeat other than going to a mall or a brunch, something where you leave with a real sense of accomplishment.
Yes, having something that you created, that's a fantastic feeling at the end of the day. So what would one of your workshops entail? So if you can sort of tell our audience, run us through one of the workshops.
Sure. So I usually start off by asking participants what drew them to the workshop so I can be sure to, focus on what's most important for them. I start off with a brief introduction about what we're making. I always try to anchor the project in sort of historical or cultural context. A skill is much more meaningful when you know that it's part of a bigger story. So for example, with the embroidery workshops, I explain how embroidery was used as a tool for protest in the suffragette movement, or even in modern day Palestine. And also it was actually used as a treatment for PTSD for soldiers in hospital after World War I. I could go on and on.
Wow.
And then the chemical-free beauty workshops, I'll explain the role that each of the different ingredients play and explain to them how or why I developed the recipe. And then I demonstrate how to do the project step by step while the participants follow along with the material I provided. And I walk around, give guidance or tips for improvement. And then at the end, I usually to give recommendations or encouragement so that people will keep making things. So I might suggest other workshops that use similar ingredients as the DIY deodorant, for example, or after an embroidery workshop, I'll invite people to join the embroidery club where we meet a couple of times a month and everybody just brings in their own projects.
Oh, lovely. Excellent. So how would someone be able to participate in one of the workshops?
The schedule and booking links are all up on glitchesandstitches.com, and I always post the schedule also on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, excellent. We'll also share that in the show notes. And what are your most popular workshops?
The chemical-free deodorant is quite popular. I think body odors are something we're particularly conscious of in the warm climate. And then the new Intro to Embroidery workshop has been generating a lot of interest recently as well. I think that a lot of people picked up this new hobby during lockdown, so I'm very happy to encourage them to continue.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you mentioned your stitching and embroidery, and it is absolutely incredible and beautiful, the things you make. Were you self-taught or did someone else teach you?
Oh, thank you so much. It's mostly self-taught, but I have taken some courses and I have several books on the subject as well.
Okay, excellent. Now, I love how you incorporate your embroidery into mending torn or old clothes. Tell us about that, and how did you come up with that idea?
Well, it obviously ties in with fast fashion as well. I had some garments that were used either with small holes or a seam that came undone, or sometimes it's just a rust stain from the drying rack. And I didn't want to throw it away, just in the interest of sustainability, trying to buy less things and to focus more on, and they always say the most sustainable garment is what you already have in your wardrobe. So as a way of getting more use out of them. But the origin of visible mending is in the Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi. It's a philosophy that aims to accept imperfection and treat flaws as a thing of beauty rather than something to be hidden away. So a good example of that is kintsugi. You might have seen pictures of ceramic bowls or cups with little golden cracks.
Right.
And so they actually repair the ceramics using actual gold. So making the scar or the breakage into something even more precious than the original object.
Excellent. So there's a long history for using this kind of way to extend the usefulness of things. That's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely.
You also create your own, you mentioned that earlier, you create your own face and hair masks and deodorant and even mascara, which I believe, as you said, are all chemical free. Was it tough to experiment with different natural ingredients and finding the perfect combination?
It's funny because as a kid, I actually used to follow DIY recipes for face masks from magazines when we had sleepovers. And now we've gone for full circle because I published a few of them in Mary Claire Arabia. So find that really entertaining. I always do a lot of versions of the recipes before landing on one that I use myself, because these are obviously all products that I use myself. And I also often continue making adjustments based on people's feedback as well. Like the deodorant one, for example, the original recipe was based on something that a recipe that a friend was using in France, but Here, it's so much hotter. The deodorant kept melting, so I had to adjust it. I had to make it stronger, obviously. So it's always kind of a work in progress.
Excellent. So what are your favorite natural ingredients to use for beauty?
I usually use a base of coconut oil in most of my recipes, almost all of them, I think. It's really versatile. It's easy to find, which is often the issue in Dubai, is finding where to buy these things. And it's pretty cheap as well.
Okay, it is a fantastic product to use in so many different things. What would you say is a common misconception that people have about chemical-free products?
I think people always kind of doubt that a chemical-free deodorant could really work. And to be honest, I don't blame them. I thought the same thing when the friend that I mentioned earlier told me that she made her own. I was like, oh, maybe that works for you over in France. I live in Dubai. Like, I need the chemicals. But I thought I should really try before judging. And I was just so impressed. It actually worked better than the store-bought deodorant that I was using before.
Amazing.
So like I said, I had to make adjustments, but it's gotten me through 2 Dubai summers now. So
it
not a small feat.
works. It definitely
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about the different collaborations that you have with other artists.
So Sister Octopi is one of my favorite projects that I've worked on so far. It's a collaboration with my cousin, Justine Formentelli. She's an abstract painter based in London. And after a few losses in the family, we began exchanging photos of paintings and sketches as a way of kind of working through our grief. And 2 years ago, we met in London and just started spitballing, brainstorming ideas on how we could turn that exchange into a more tangible, substantial project. And so we came up with this idea and system of sending scans of A4 artwork back and forth for the other to continue, and then linking them together in these giant scrolls that are 2 meters and 30 centimeters long. So they're giants, and the idea is to hang them from the ceiling to create a surrealist upside down forest installation for visitors to wander through. There are 16 in total, and they each have different themes that we spend just hours on the phone discussing. It's been a really great way to keep in touch with a family member who with whom like I've never lived in the same city as, actually.
That's amazing, and it looks absolutely incredible when you're standing in the images I've seen. It's fantastic. It's so beautiful what you've created together. You must be so proud of that.
We're so excited about this project and are really looking forward to finding a space to showcase it in. So that's our next big challenge.
Oh, wow. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Very, very exciting. So Natalya, looking at how busy you are, it's clear that you have established yourself with quite a community here in the UAE. Was it difficult finding a crowd here when you first started?
So starting a business having just arrived in a new country is not ideal. In addition to all of the usual challenges of starting a business, I didn't have a personal network to rely on in the beginning either. So it was quite isolating, actually, not having colleagues to exchange with. So there was a lot of self-doubt and imposter syndrome in the beginning. And I searched everywhere for groups of like-minded people, but couldn't seem to find what I was looking for. So actually last year, I decided that I just have to start my own community. And in December 2019, I hosted the first Craft Jam meetup in Al Sirkat Avenue. So it's a monthly meeting, sort of a hybrid of co-working and networking for independent creatives. There are all sorts of members. We have soap makers, photographers, leather crafters, woodworkers, designers, artists, writers. We even had a puppeteer a few sessions ago.
Oh, wow.
And the idea is we share opportunities, contacts, give feedback, and just generally support each other. It's really inspiring. I always leave the sessions with my mind just buzzing with new ideas.
Super. So when you couldn't find a solution, you created one. I love that. Excellent. Now, let's talk about 2020 and everything it has brought on us all. How has COVID-19 affected your workshops?
So obviously I had to put my workshops on hold completely for several months. And nowadays the capacity is limited, but at least it gives me the opportunity to chat more with the people who join. I'm really lucky in terms of clients. I always meet like the most inspiring people at the workshop. So in a way, for me, it's almost more fun to have smaller groups.
Sure, makes sense. And your personal experience with COVID?
At times in the beginning, obviously, I felt anxious. I'm sure we all did. But in a lot of ways, it forced me to push creative boundaries and kind of explore new ideas. I tried my best to use that time to inspire other people to be creative because, like I said before, it's like my therapy. It's what I need to clear my head and makes me feel better. So I tried to share that with others on Instagram, just ideas of projects that they could do with items that they have from around the house or that they could find at the supermarket when that's the only place we could go. And in fact, with some of the other people from the Craft Jam group, we started a hashtag, the Creative Quarantine Dubai, to showcase the tutorials. And it was all like either upcycled material or there was one that was painting with salt. So hopefully, I hope that might have helped some people ease their anxiety as well.
I'm so sure that it did. It's a fantastic way to deal with the stresses we have faced. Now, I know you've mentioned that you've traveled quite a bit. Has your traveling played a role in your creativity and your inspiration?
Yeah, I've spent most of my life abroad now. I don't even know what's home. So I guess you could say I'm a real third culture kid. So the places I've lived in are a huge part of my identity. I feel like I'm just kind of like the sum of all of those experiences and with all of the different cultures.
And really such diverse cultures that you've moved. Really, it's amazing. Tell us one of your proudest moments during your journey so far.
Last year, I was quite proud of a pop-up customization stand that I ran for Dubai Mall. So it was a stand where customers brought in their purchases from the mall to customize with embroidery or patches. It was a really big project and totally got me out of my comfort zone, but I learned so much. It was the kind of thing that I had to do to be 100% sure that I was capable of doing it. So it was a huge satisfaction.
Lovely. Now, one question I love to ask everybody is, what is the one thing that you do on a daily basis, regardless of how busy you are?
I think you might have a disappointing answer for me this time. To be honest, every day for me is completely different. I always read tons of things about the positive impacts of habits, but I don't even get up at the same time every day. Sometimes I work nights, sometimes I work days. I think the only thing that I definitely always do every day is coffee and check my inbox.
It sounds like me. And do you have any other hobbies and passions apart from what we have talked about today?
I kind of follow my interests wherever it takes me. Creativity is such a wide angle. I think it can kind of cover anything and everything. I'm interested in all the things, basically.
Yeah. Well, I think also because when you are creative, you have so many different things that would attract your interest. So let's talk about 2021. What does 2021 look like for you, and do you have any big or exciting plans?
So I'm planning on focusing a bit more on my artwork and developing some larger scale pieces. And I'm also hoping to have a physical pop-up with some free workshops sometime next year as well.
Oh, wow. That sounds fantastic. I'm looking forward to that. Excellent. So thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story with us. We really, really appreciate that. But now we have come to the segment of our show where I would like to ask you a few rapid fire questions. So it's our little game show. So just the first thing that pops into your head. What is your favorite hobby?
Embroidery.
Shoes or bags?
Shoes.
Heels or flats?
Flats.
Cooking or baking?
Cooking.
What is your kryptonite?
Admin.
And name one item on your bucket list.
There are so many. See all the places, do all the things.
Thank you so much for playing along with that little show of ours. Now, before we wrap up, we would like to do our green pill moment. So for the green pill moment, could you share an inspiring or life-changing experience that you have gone through, your green pill moment?
So I mentioned that in 2018, my husband and I were at a place where we both kind of wanted to change careers at the same time. And the truth is, it wasn't completely by accident that we both were looking for a change at the same time. In 2016, my husband was actually diagnosed with cancer.
Wow.
And Yeah, it was a big shock because obviously we don't normally expect younger people to get cancer, but the truth is he was the perfect candidate for the cancer that he got.
My
Between
goodness.
25 to 35, white male, he checked all the boxes. So, when something that life-altering happens, everything else just fades away. All of a sudden, it's the only thing that matters is getting through this. And everything else that seemed important before is just suddenly meaningless. And strangely, actually, when you're in the thick of things, we were incredibly focused. There's always another test, another lab result that we need to get in. We always think that at the next thing, we're going to finally get an answer, doing the claims with insurance. There's always something to be focused on, and everything else just seems meaningless. But what nobody talks about is actually once all of that is over, everything else kind of still seems meaningless. When you compare the things that seemed important before, I remember sitting in this meeting, we're just endlessly debating over shades of poppy red or vermilion red. And it just seems so utterly benign, especially for fast fashion where, the t-shirt might be worn 2 or 3 times and then thrown out. I was just what's the point?
Right.
So it's taken a long time to recover from that part, actually, more than the physical portion of the sickness is finding a meaning and a sense of purpose again. And if I'm honest, we're still not there 100%, but we're searching and exploring. Moving to Dubai was part of that. And it's really been actually the driving force behind Glitches and Stitches, is just searching for things that make us happy.
Wow, what a story. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's a very personal story, but that is incredible. It does show you when you go through something like that, it puts things in perspective for one, where you have to reassess your goals and what you really want out of life. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Natalya, for sharing your fantastic and inspiring story with us today. I'm sure our audience will thoroughly enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Before we say goodbye, though, could you please tell our listeners where they can find and follow you? We'll put this in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. So lovely speaking with you. I at Glitches and Stitches everywhere on Facebook, Instagram, and the website is glitchesandstitches.com. And you can follow the Sister Octopi project. We have a separate Instagram for that at Sister Octopi.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So again, thank you so much for joining me today. I wish you all the very best, and I'm super excited to see all the projects that you are working on and what you'll be doing next year as well.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. And I'm excited to have found a new favorite podcast. I'm such a podcast junkie, so I'm always looking for new ones.
Glad excellent.
To find a nice local one too.
Yeah, I love podcasts. I listen to them all the time.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.